So what you're going to see with Lady Edwina Grosvenor, who's, as I say, chair of our advisory board, is doing so much in the philanthropic space, is her passion around prisons and women's prisons and prison reform. And it's incredible to see that. She has to leave at 9:30, I think, to go to, guess where, Wandsworth Prison, which I think says it all. I think, Edwina, in terms of your commitment to this space. But all of us welcome Edwina. Thank you for coming and talking again and what you learned in Hong Kong, and share your passion about philanthropy, but perhaps slightly more so around women's prisons and the prison system. Edwina.
Thank you very much. I wish every morning started with someone saying lovely words about me, but thank you so much for coming today. The theme that we're exploring today is wealth transfer and next generation giving. It is a topic that I feel very passionate about myself, not just professionally, but personally. And I say that because in many ways I am a product of this very dynamic. My family, the Grosvenor family, are no strangers to philanthropy. We have a long-standing track record of supporting charitable initiatives over many, many years. And we've been navigating questions of transition and philanthropy for generations. I always laugh because when I'm at philanthropic events that sort of go on for a day or a couple of days, and I'll be talking to other philanthropists and they'll say, oh, I'm first gen, I'm second gen. And then they look at me. I was in America recently and we were sort of having this conversation. What gen are you? And I was like, oh God, many, many, many gens. And I'm still not quite sure what gen I am, but sort of hundreds of years of philanthropy and generations. So these conversations are very prominent for us. So today I'd like to share a little of my journey as chair of the Global Philanthropic Advisory Board, and also to reflect a little bit on the 5th Talking Philanthropy Forum, which, as Ben mentioned, took place in Hong Kong in November of last year, and focusing on this very topic of intergenerational wealth transfer. The event, which was generously supported by the Gates Foundation, our partners, the United Nations Foundation, the University of Cambridge, and other very distinguished entities that were in the room with us. And it brought together an extraordinary group of philanthropists and experts from around the world. You know, one of the things that appealed to me, yes, I am a philanthropist, but I know what I know. I don't know what other people know. And I think it's really, really important to immerse yourself amongst others. What I've learned is that philanthropy is so intensely personal that it's about the individual, it's about the persons. Therefore, you have a sort of, you know, so many different approaches coming from so many different directions. There's no one formula, sadly. So we spent 2 days engaged in rich, thought-provoking dialogue, exchanging ideas, of course, experiences, insights that span generations, geographies, and approaches to giving. One of the key themes we discussed, and one that I want to emphasize, is the sheer scale of wealth transfer that's already beginning to unfold, particularly in Asia, but of course around the whole world. An estimated $31 trillion, it's not a sentence I say very often, is shifting hands globally by 2033. 31 trillion US dollars. That figure is staggering, and within it lies both an unprecedented opportunity, but also, of course, a bit of a responsibility to make sure that it's sort of how we can help try and shape that and get that money into places that it's most needed. But what stood out for me during our time in Hong Kong was this, that to truly unlock the philanthropic potential of this generational wealth transfer, we have to start and keep going with open dialogue. It's really simple, but sometimes it's the most simple things that can be the most tricky things to do. And that's certainly been true in my own life. The conversations that I've shared with my parents over the years and the example that they set for me, they made philanthropy a core part of my life, whether they sort of know it or not. It wasn't a crash course on how to do philanthropy. at all. It was conversations that I listened to. It was sitting around the dinner table. It was conversations when we were traveling, when we were in the car, when we were in dialogue. But I also recognize that this isn't always easy. The culture within my family was always very open. It was conversational. That is the culture that I was brought up in. There was really nothing that was off limits to talk about in our family. My father, who's not with us anymore, is slightly more buttoned up maybe than my mother, but he had no choice but to roll with the open conversations that sort of went on the whole time. But of course, some families simply do not have that culture, and that can be difficult. At Talking Philanthropy, back in Hong Kong, we spoke candidly about our relationships with our family members, and the conversations did, of course, become deeply personal really quite quickly. They revealed, of course, what we all know, which is how complex and emotionally layered family dynamics can be. In the privacy of some of those sessions that we had, there were moments of real vulnerability, there were a few tears, and it's hard for many people to talk about emotions. It's hard to talk about money, actually. It's sort of countercultural almost for Brits. And philanthropy, of course, asks us to talk about both, often at the same time. So I think we need to recognise how difficult that can be. But what emerged was something very important, a reminder that beyond the mechanics of wealth, beyond the trusts and financial structures, it is honest intergenerational dialogue which truly lays the foundation for meaningful, happy, and lasting philanthropy. The other insight I'd like to share with you is about passion, which Ben alluded to. Time and time again, we saw that when next generation philanthropists are given the freedom to align their giving with what truly drives them, the results can be really transformational. And speaking from a personal point of view, I really resonate with that because it's actually about identity. You know, prisons is what drives me, criminal justice reform. That's what I've done for 25 years. That is my identity. I've been able to lean in there because I was sort of given that freedom. My passion was allowed to come forward. So I think that needs to be held on to. One standout example, again, as Ben mentioned, was at the Talking Philanthropy event, environmentalist Vasa Seidel, granddaughter of philanthropist, CNN founder Ted Turner. She joined us from the USA for a couple of days. It was great to get to know her. And she is also fiercely committed, but to protecting oceans, not prisons, particularly from the emerging threat of deep-sea mining. As president of the Oxygen Project, she's building coalitions of scientists, NGOs, and industry leaders to push for meaningful change. And she's also taken on the leadership within her own family foundation, establishing the T3 board, which I always thought sounded a bit like a boy band, T3, but it's the Turner Third Generation Board. And actually what that does is allows the much younger members of the family, I think it's aged from 12 upwards, it allows them to sit on a board. It allows them to gain board experience. You know, boardrooms can be very, very terrifying places for people who aren't used to them. And then you say, come into the boardroom and talk about emotions and money, and it becomes even more terrifying. So I think that was a really interesting point, that it was sort of getting the younger ones engaged without just sort of waiting till later and then terrifying them by turfing them into a boardroom. So in some ways, her journey is similar to my own. Now, sort of in my 40s, my philanthropic journey started in my teens, actually. So when Vasa started talking about that pivotal age of 12 and 13, it really resonated with the age that I was at when I started becoming cognizant of some of the things that were going on. As I said, my passion is rooted, some might say slightly obsessive passion is rooted in prisons and with justice reform. And over the years, that's led me to study criminology, work within prisons, both in this country, excuse me, home and abroad. And ultimately, a couple of years ago, it led me to design, build, and found Hope Street, which is a project which sounds very lofty, in fact, which is about me sort of having a good go at trying to redesign the justice system for women and their children in this country. I know, mad, isn't it? But you know, you've got to aim high, and then you might fall and sort of hit somewhere in the middle. Hope Street is about giving prisons, magistrates, and police a safe place to send and or sentence women in the community with their children, crucially, in order to prevent the children from being taken into care. In this country, we have found ourselves in a position where if a woman is homeless or her abuser is in her home, she comes up to a magistrate for whatever usually low-level crime she might have committed. And if that woman does not have an address or a safe address, the magistrate cannot give that woman a community sentence. So the crime that she has committed warrants a community sentence. If there's no safe address, if she has no home, if her abuser's in her home, the magistrate says, tell me where I'm meant to send this woman with her children. Show me the safe place where she can do her community sentence. I will send her there. Those places do not exist on the whole. So in Hampshire, I decided to make sure that Hope Street and the beds and the buildings covered the whole county. And now magistrates in Hampshire can remand women to us when they're awaiting trial. They can come on sentence with their children. We take women from prison who are eligible for early release but often get stuck in prison because there's no safe address to go to. Women are often given tents when they leave prison because there is no safe accommodation for them. That's no secret in the prison service, but it always makes people's hair stand on end when I say it in other places. And we also take women off the probation contract. Now, Hope Street is designed to be replicable and scalable because these issues actually aren't just issues that women face all around the country, but actually Hope Street has implications, I think, around the world. A lot of the work that I do is also in other countries, so I do know that thematically the drivers of sending women into prison in most countries are exactly the same. It's sexual abuse, interpersonal abuse, it's the coercive control. But I'm not here to actually give you a crash course about prisons and women's offending, but that's what I've been busy with during sort of my day job, and it has been that freedom that my parents gave me to not tell me where to put my philanthropy or what to do, but just allowed me to sort of to go. And here I am 25 years later, having a great time, even if the work is incredibly challenging. I do remember when we were sitting around the tables, and for a while I worked in the men's prisons. I've worked in the men's prisons as well, and of course I'm going on to Wandsworth. That is a big, crumbling, disastrous male prison not so far away. But I do remember conversations. My father had big bushy eyebrows, and he'd say, you know, what are you up to tomorrow? And I said, oh, well, you know, I'm now working for a charity. I'm going into a prison. I'm going to be talking to male lifers to talk to them about their employment prospects on release. I just saw your eyebrows go. My father's eyebrows did the same thing. These big bushy eyebrows would sort of disappear into his hair, and where they often stayed. So what can we take away from all of this? There are three key messages I'd like to leave you with. First, I think this moment does represent an enormous opportunity. People do say that I'm the ultimate optimist, but I think that's a better place to be. So I do think this moment presents an enormous opportunity. Even a small fraction of the global wealth transfer redirected into charitable causes could have a transformative impact, especially at a time when governments alone, as we know and as we see quite often, cannot carry the burden of solving all of society's issues. Second is a moment of hope. It's easy to be overwhelmed as soon as you turn on the radio. It's sort of disaster after disaster. As soon as you turn the television on, it's easy to be overwhelmed by the problems we face in the world today. But when we look at the possibilities ahead, if we get this right and get on the front foot, crucially, it gives us a reason to be optimistic. And perhaps we can dare to dream that we have the chance to reshape the philanthropic landscape for generations to come. Third, and most importantly, we must prioritise family dialogue. So if you take one thing away from today, let it be this. Whether you're part of a family navigating these tricky questions, or part of an organisation working with those families who are, supporting and facilitating open, honest, intergenerational conversations are absolutely key. This will be easy, as I said, in some families. It will be virtually impossible in others, but it doesn't make the point any less valid. So ask yourself this. Last night, actually, when I was thinking about what I was going to say today, I sort of came up with this term, happy philanthropy. So ask yourself this, is it just philanthropy, or is it happy philanthropy? Philanthropy, of course, is fine. You go through the motions. You do what you do. You're either a philanthropist or it's your job, you're an advisor or whatever. But of course, happy philanthropy is the next level. And I would link that back to the passion point and the identity point, because it's all completely interrelated. So if you're blocking someone's passion, you're blocking their identity, you're blocking the happy philanthropy. You will just simply be going through the motions. So as we look to the future, we can't avoid or overlook the world the next generation is inheriting. In today's fast-changing digital landscape, where emerging technologies are just starting to show their true impact, we're witnessing a fundamental shift in how giving is understood and practiced. This is totally above my pay grade, so I'm going to leave that to Shrishti and Valentina to talk more about a little bit later on. As I said, apologies, I do have to go to Wandsworth Prison later on today, on the hottest day of the year. I don't know how that has come together, but I will be here till about 10:30, 10:20, 10:30, and then I'll be heading off. But again, to reiterate what Ben said, if you do have the time to take a look at the Talking Philanthropy platform, don't watch all 6 hours. No one would expect you to do that. But if there is, the reason that I stand here, the reason that I talk, the reason that I went to Hong Kong is that when I was younger, especially as a female philanthropist, there weren't many others. If there were, I didn't really know about them. There weren't so many organisations like this. There weren't so many gatherings. Or maybe there were and I just wasn't invited. I don't know. But I think it is really important. There is so much we can all learn from each other. So keep that dialogue, keep talking, and just thank you so much for coming to listen.